Okay, great. I think we can get started. Thank you everybody for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are calling in from. We are very excited to continue our Inclusive Fieldwork special seminar series. And this week we have Heather Page, who will be talking to us about C2C, inclusion and accessibility for at-sea education and research experiences. And before we get started, just a few quick reminders and a few announcements. We will have a welcome and announcement, which is happening right now, followed by Heather's talk, which will be for about 30 minutes, following which we will have a moderated question and answers for about 10 minutes. And then after tea time with the speaker, Heather will be staying and chatting to us in a bit of a more informal setting. So if students, postdocs, early career researchers, you're highly encouraged to stick around and chat to Heather and all of us. And as always, don't forget to send your questions via chat to the questions eoPERCS host, who today is Chrissy Hall. A few housekeeping rules. eoPERCS values the participation of all folks interested in paleosciences. Please remember to abide by our code of conduct during today's seminar. You should be muted, but for some reason, if you find yourself to be unmuted, please mute yourself so Heather can concentrate on giving a wonderful seminar. And if you have, again, any questions or any technical issues, please reach out to questions@eoPERCS host, or you can also use the raise hand function and then we will unmute you. And you can ask your question if you would like to do it in that way. We also have closed captions built into the Zoom. You can use the CC button to show or hide them. There will be two links that will be dropped into the Zoom chat. One is a nomination form. So if you know any early career researcher, we would love to have them and have them talk in the seminar. And then the second one is going to be a weekly feedback form for demographic information. With that, we can get started and talking about the speaker. So we have Heather Page, who is joining us from the Sea Education Association. She is currently an assistant professor of oceanography there. Before that, Heather started her journey doing a bachelor's of science in marine biology and environmental science at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, followed by a PhD in oceanography at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. And then Heather did a postdoc or was a postdoctoral research fellow at Mote Marine Laboratory in the US. And with that, Heather, feel free to take over screen share.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. A minute, yeah. All right, hopefully everyone can see my screen, which shows a sailboat. Great. So thank you so much for the introduction. I'm very humbled to be invited to be part of this excellent, important lecture series. And I'm very excited to share some of my experiences and thoughts about inclusive, accessible fieldwork, specifically at sea. I truly believe that everyone who's interested should have the opportunity to see the sea. So this talk will be exploring inclusivity and accessibility for at-sea education and research through personal experiences as an oceanographer and an educator at Sea Education Association, where I've been an assistant professor since 2019. So first, I want to set the stage a little bit about why we're even having this lecture series about inclusivity in geosciences. So the geoscience community is the least diverse of all science, technology, engineering, and mathematical fields. Geoscience field is dominated by white scientists. A report by the American Geosciences Institute showed that less than 20% of all geoscience bachelor degrees are awarded to underrepresented minorities, including Hispanic, Black, African American, American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders. The numbers are even lower for doctoral degrees awarded. Only 8% of doctorates awarded in 2019 were to people from these underrepresented groups. And so clearly there's a problem with both recruitment of underrepresented minorities in the geoscience field, as well as with retention. So then this is just one example. We see similar trends across other underrepresented groups, like certain gender identities, as well as people with disabilities. So how do we welcome these historically excluded groups into the geosciences? How can we increase both recruitment and retention? Well, Dr. Dutt said it best in their 2020 paper entitled Race and Racism in the Geosciences. Diversity and inclusion cannot exist without a sense of belonging. In fact, sense of belonging is important across all career stages for ocean scientists who identify as Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So we must build inclusive practices and environments where everyone feels like they belong. These environments include not only laboratory and office and classroom settings, but also the field, which can be remote sites where geological surveys are conducted, polar regions where they're studying the paleoclimate, or perhaps even research vessels in the middle of the ocean, which is where I come in. So as an ocean scientist, how do I ensure everyone feels welcome, included, and valued? We know experiential learning in the field can have positive, transformative impacts on young people's sense of belonging within sciences. Diversity-focused programs, research experiences with support, and mentorship lead to positive outcomes. Ocean scientists who identify as Black, Indigenous, or a person of color reported increased feeling of acceptance in the field, science identity, and belief in their ability to accomplish tasks. On the flip side, discrimination, lack of allies, and negative research and mentorship experiences can reduce retention of BIPOC scientists. So this now gives us a framework for thinking about increasing diversity, inclusion, and sense of belonging within the ocean sciences. We need to focus on building positive research experiences and mentorship while reducing discrimination. And this is especially important for ocean-going programs. So ocean-going experiences can be rewarding experiences that build collaborations, teach new skills, and facilitate further research. However, they can also be really harmful experiences for people with one or more identities with a history of being excluded or marginalized in ocean sciences. This includes people of color, people who identify as part of the LGBTQIA+ community, and women, as well as others. So individuals with these identities are more likely to experience harassment, bullying, and discrimination while at sea. Therefore, safety needs to be emphasized for underrepresented groups to have these positive ocean-going experiences that include research and mentorship. So that brings me to the big question of this talk, which is how can we make experiential learning at sea more inclusive? To me, this means fostering safety, accessibility, sense of belonging, unique science identity, and self-efficacy. These are all on my mind as an educator and a chief scientist. So I believe we need to address each of these components to truly have inclusive fieldwork at sea. So the short answer to this question is we need multiple approaches to building inclusive ocean fieldwork. So next, I want to introduce the Education Association so you can understand the model we already have in place for ocean-going experiences for students. Then I'm going to share some of the strategies we have been implementing recently to address some concerns centered around inclusivity and accessibility. So by the end of this talk, I hope you'll understand the considerations we make when designing these at-sea programs and have some strategies that can be implemented at your own fieldwork experiences. So Sea Education Association is a nonprofit located in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, USA. Woods Hole is a world-renowned oceanographic research community with a really rich maritime history. For example, Sea Education Association, or SEA, has been taking students to sea since 1971, so students can love to sea. Our mission over the past 50 years has been to educate and inspire ocean scholars, stewards, and leaders. We achieve this goal by taking students to sea to study the state of the global ocean and coastal communities through hands-on oceanographic and maritime studies research. And community is a huge aspect of everything we do at SEA, from living and learning on shore together to conducting research abroad and aboard a sailing school vessel. And this focus on community really allows students to develop skills in communication, leadership, and collaboration. So we really try to foster this sense of belonging and show that everyone is valued in a community setting. We offer study away and study abroad programs for high school, gap year, and undergraduate students. Many of our programs start on shore with active learning in a classroom setting. And then we transition into the second component of our program that involves taking students to sea and abroad and aboard a sailing school vessel to study changing ocean conditions, as well as to learn from local communities we visit and work in. So the sea component utilizes one of our 2 sailing school vessels, the SSV Robert C. Siemens and the SSV Corliss Kramer, shown here on the slide. This designation of SSV means there are no passengers on board. Everyone, including students, are expected to contribute to the shipboard community by standing watch and assuming responsibilities during emergencies. Each of our ships include bunk beds, shared living spaces like the main salon where we eat and hang out, as well as a library. On deck, we have a chart house for navigation and communication. And we also have a shipboard laboratory and science deck where we deploy oceanographic equipment and analyze seawater and biological samples. So students stand watch under the supervision and alongside a professional licensed crew. Standing watch includes helping to operate the sailboat and conducting oceanographic research. So you might be standing watch on deck, where you're doing things like steering the ship, standing lookouts, conducting weather checks or boat safety checks. If you're standing watch in a lab with a scientist, you will be deploying oceanographic equipment over the side of the vessel to collect those seawater and biological samples, or you might be analyzing those samples in our laboratory. Watch standing includes different phases of learning with increased responsibility during each phase. So when the students first get on the ship, we're really focused on teaching them everything they need to know to conduct this oceanography research and sail this boat as our research platform. And then over time, they start to master these skills. And so we can hand over more responsibility and let them take the lead. And so this really promotes self-efficacy and empowers students that they can do tasks independently that they had probably never done before going to sea. It's been probably the most rewarding part of my job, is seeing the growth of these students and the transformation of these students as scientists and leaders throughout the course of their sea expedition. In addition to standing watch, students also conduct independent and collaborative research using data they collected themselves during their field experience. So these students are developing their own hypothesis. They work with me as the chief scientist, as well as the assistant scientist on the ship, to really collect all their data and analyze all their data. And then this culminates with the presentation of their data, usually to the ship's company, as you can see in these photos, but also sometimes to our local communities that we visit during our sea expeditions. So I hope that gives you just a framework of what I kind of walked into in 2019 at SEA and the type of programs that they offer at that time. So within SEA's learning ecosystem, I've really been asking the question lately of how can we further promote inclusivity and accessibility? And I approached this question using my experiences as a faculty member, as a chief scientist, as a disabled female scientist, and also as a co-chair of SEA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Here at SEA, we do have, code of conduct and field safety plans. So we have been emphasizing safety of our students and our crew, and we continue to do so. But today, I really want to focus on some other strategies we have been developing for safer, more inclusive ocean-going experiences for students and crew. And that is communication, mental health and emotional first aid training, creating a network of mentors, and amplifying diverse voices. And I'm sharing these specific strategies as examples of things we've done at SEA. But again, I hope you can take them and apply them to your own research experiences, either as a student or as a faculty member or a scientist. So this first strategy I want to share with you all is basically communication. asking people what they need, and then following through with those conversations. So for example, on my very first day at SEA, I'm sitting in my office and the director of student and medical affairs stops by. I wasn't really sure why she was there, but she simply asked me, what do you need to do your job effectively while in the field and on the ship? She knew I was coming in with a hearing impairment. I had been very upfront with my disability during my interviews. And so she wanted to know basically, how can I do my job better? How can they help me do my job better? And so phrasing the question in this way made me feel welcomed, included, and valued. Nobody was making assumptions about my ability to do my job as a disabled female scientist. And also no one was making assumptions for me about accommodations. And so this question opened a dialogue. I told her my thoughts based on what I understood about the organization and life at sea. And together we kind of came up with some solutions which were implemented before I went to sea for the first time just 1 week later. So one of the solutions we implemented was researching and basically putting a vibrating alarm in my bunk on the ship. So this included rewiring the entire alarm system to tie in this vibrating alarm. So I would be alerted if there was an emergency because I don't wear any of my hearing aids at nighttime. So I'm completely deaf. So this way I feel more safe on the ship and more able to do my job. We also have this in at least 1 or 2 of the student bunks on each ship as well. Within our academic program, students work together to create community standards for promoting inclusive, accessible learning environments, including the ships. This is in addition to our code of conduct and field safety plans. So the community standards are developed through discussions in small groups and then together as an entire class or even the entire ship's company if we're already on the ship. So this approach allows students to have ownership over those community standard guidelines and really adds another layer of appropriate conduct while at sea. So again, making students feel safe, making sure they feel welcome and included. In addition, I started doing daily check-ins while at sea. So at SEA, we always do a daily gathering on the quarterdeck of the ship while at sea. The primary function of this meeting is really to account for everyone, making sure everyone's on the ship, as well as disseminating information. But I started implementing a thumbs check-in as well. So essentially, everyone gives a thumbs up, I'm doing great, I'm happy, I'm healthy. A thumbs down, I want to get off the ship now, or somewhere in the middle. This allows the captain and the chief scientist to quickly assess the well-being of individuals and the entire group. We then seek out individuals who give a thumbs down to allow them a private space to share what's been going on. And this allows us again to open a dialogue and often address their issues related to inclusion and accessibility. So two-way communication, I think, is really important component of having inclusive fieldwork. Some of the issues that arise during this daily check-in with students and crew are related to emotional health. 1 in 4 undergraduate students report experiencing mental health concerns arising from financial concerns, being away from home, isolation, fear of missing out, and living with others. And these are certainly all issues that arise at sea for students and crew, especially isolation, fear of missing out, and living with other people, some of whom you might not have met before. Therefore, to foster a welcoming, inclusive environment, we must build a safe environment, which includes supporting mental health needs of everyone on board. So this past year, SEA has been offering mental health and emotional first aid training to all faculty and staff before each program begins. We contract a group of psychologists who offer this training each semester. And then these psychologists are on call if the captain or chief scientist needs advice on how to approach a mental health issue while at sea. On a personal note, this resource has really made me feel more empowered to correctly address mental health issues that arise while at sea. It's just more tools in my toolkit and how I can support other people. And having these experts on call also really makes me feel a little bit more at ease because I know I have support when I need it, despite being isolated in the middle of the ocean. So this is a really important training that we should be considering in addition to, physical health training. Another thing I think about a lot is creating a diverse network of mentors for students. And I think this is something SEA does especially well. Since our programs are interdisciplinary, there are multiple faculty teaching and sailing, and SEA intentionally chooses faculty from a variety of backgrounds and identities for each program. In addition, the professional crew serve as mentors to students, and I encourage them to be mentors to students who need additional mentors. So a professional crew is usually 12 to 15 individuals who work closely with the students while at sea. And so having this model of multiple potential mentors from the faculty to crew members allows students to really choose which mentor or mentors they feel most comfortable talking to based on personalities or shared identities. And so this is something we want to continue working towards, is having a diverse network of mentors with different identities for students to have options and good mentorship relationships. And then finally, I think more and more about how we can amplify diverse voices while at sea. And this is true for both research programs and education programs. So this strategy can really take on many forms depending on where you are visiting and or working. And so I'm just going to share a few examples of what we've been doing at SEA. So for education at sea, we can focus on decolonizing the curricula. One way to do this as a scientist is to ensure there are guest speakers and scientists from diverse backgrounds, including underrepresented groups in ocean sciences. So really making sure we're including multiple perspectives and expertise in our curricula. We develop partnerships and scholarships to increase diversity of students. For example, we partner with the New York Harbor School to fund tuition for a few high school students or a cohort of high school students to join our 2-week sailing expedition around New England. We also offer a variety of diversity scholarships within each program to increase access to ocean-going experiences. So the key to developing this is really to ease that financial burden that can lead to mental health issues, and also bringing in cohorts of people so no one feels isolated or that they're the only person with their identity on the ship. We should be including voices from local communities we visit as well. Most research cruises, including SEA voyages, include international port stops. So something I'm studying this year is called a sense of place seminar, which will occur before we go to sea. So this seminar series will allow students to hear about local cultures and ocean conservation from people living and working at our planned port stops. And so we're also going to be recording these seminars so crew can watch the recordings of the seminars as well. So again, we are not telling the students what the local culture is like, what people are doing in the communities that we're visiting and working in, but rather we're amplifying and inviting the local voices to tell their own stories. And another way to amplify the voices from the places we work is to hire local people from places the ships visit as faculty or as guest scientists or other roles on the ship. So for example, this fall, a Tahitian scholar will be teaching on shore and at sea during an upcoming undergraduate program at SEA called Sustainability in Pacific Island Communities and Ecosystems. So in addition to salary, all of their expenses, such as travel and housing, will be covered by SEA. So this is a model we're planning to replicate in other programs. This will deepen our engagement with the communities we visit regularly for ocean studies. Equally important, it will add a significantly more nuanced and local perspective to our programs. So for me, inclusive programs at sea means we're not just white scientists going to places, doing the science, and then taking all of our data with us and leaving. We really want to foster partnerships and include people in the research as well as in subsequent policies that might be developed. Ultimately, by amplifying these diverse voices, we can promote a sense of belonging and ensure we are including multiple perspectives and expertise while at sea. As Graham et al. Said in 2022, if there is a diversity of perspectives within the field of marine sciences, there is increased opportunity for growth and change, which cannot be achieved if the traditional status quo continues to remain unchanged and immovable. So these are just a few examples of how we've been increasing inclusion and accessibility to at-sea programs. And although I gave specific examples again from SEA based on my personal experiences, I hope they can be modified and applied to everyone's ocean research and education experiences. And so these are just some of the puzzle pieces we need to be thinking about when creating a full picture of inclusive fieldwork at sea. So what other puzzle pieces do we need to create inclusive and accessible ocean education and research programs? This is something I love thinking about, and I have lots of ideas, and I would love to talk with you all about these ideas on really creating a shared vision for the future. So please stick around after the Q&A session and after the talk to have an open discussion about inclusive fieldwork at sea, and to create this shared vision for what practices we think should be in place 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years from now. And with that, I would like to thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to continuing to talk about inclusive fieldwork in ocean sciences.
Thank you, Heather, for the great talk, and looking forward to the discussion on future at-sea education as well. Just to remind the audience members, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them on the chat and send them to the questions@eoPERCS host. And we have one or two that have already, a few actually that have already come up, and we can get started with those. And I will also drop them in the Zoom as well for you to read as well, Heather. So the first question is, it's anonymous, great talk. Do you think it's relatively easier for students to ask for what they need in a setting such as sea as compared to in a classroom? If so, what strategies could be used in the classroom to make it a more open environment?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think the nice thing about SEA is that it is a smaller setting. Each of our classes is about 20 students. And so it's a lot easier to get to know your faculty and have those conversations. However, SEA also includes bringing students from their home institutions, so colleges and universities around the US, to a completely new environment where they know no one. And so in that case, it can make it harder for them to speak up and ask for what they need. One strategy I've been using in the classroom, or I guess a couple of strategies I use in a classroom setting, is first I include an accessibility and inclusion statement on my syllabus. So this statement basically outlines expectations centered around inclusivity and accessibility. I'm also very open with my disability, and so I state in that syllabus, I have a disability. Here's how that's going to impact us in the classroom. And then I invite students to also share, what accommodations they might need, or even just if they want to talk about how to make learning more accessible. So they don't need to disclose any disability necessarily, but let's just have a dialogue. Let's talk about it. And so that's in my syllabus, and it's also emphasized on the very first day of class. So I make sure when I'm introducing the course that I really spend time on this topic as well. And so again, I'm hoping just by setting that example, being open about my own disability and my experience, that kind of invites students to also feel comfortable sharing what they need and asking for those accommodations as well.
Thank you for sharing your insight, Heather. We have another question that is, do you have any suggestions on how faculty should reach out to a diverse group of instructors to help decolonize the curriculum? Thank you for highlighting this.
Yeah, another great question. It's something that I'm still figuring out how to do the most appropriate way myself. I think, again, it really just comes down to opening up dialogue. So not necessarily just coming with a direct ask, but open that dialogue, get to know people. I think just having conversations and being kind can go a long way towards building those relationships. And really, again, just asking, like, what do you want out of this partnership? So I don't think decolonizing curriculum means, we should necessarily be the ones teaching about diversity. It means building those relationships and really strong partnerships where both sets of partners are getting something out of that relationship. So a symbiosis, if you will.
Yep. Great. Another question. Thank you for this talk. You mentioned research sharing in your program. I would be curious about your thoughts on accessibility at conferences, etc. As a hard of hearing student, I've struggled in particular with poster sessions, but it's hard for me to envision a good alternative.
Yeah, that's really hard for me too. Yeah, so I've come to accept that I need alone time while at conferences. And this might mean not going to every single talk or every single social event. It's taken me a while to accept that. Definitely as a student, when I was first going to conferences, I was like, I need to be there for every single thing. I can't miss anything. I have to like fully network and get to know everyone. And then over time, I realized I was actually harming myself by doing that, because I was reducing kind of my own battery levels and not able to get the most out of the rest of the conference because I was trying to push and do everything. And so one thing that I've tried to do is really, again, just take time to myself sometime during the day. Maybe there's a time where there's not that many interesting talks. So I'll just be like, okay, I'm gonna go back to my hotel room and just kind of be by myself for a little bit, be quiet. And then I also try to reach out to individuals one-on-one to set up, coffee chats or chats not in those big settings like poster sessions or, bars and things like that. If you're presenting at a poster session, it's challenging. I wish I had a really good solution, but I haven't really come up with one. Thankfully, I've been able to just kind of stand really close and tell people, hey, I need to lip read you. And so that helps. But yeah, if you have any great ideas, I would love to hear them.
Yeah, thank you for answering. And those are great ideas for this person who asked the question. And yeah, if there are more, this would be perfect conversation to have after tea time as well. So thank you for answering that. We have a few more questions that have come since. This is a question by Simon Crowhurst. Thank you for the excellent talk. What are the advantages and disadvantages of using a sailboat as opposed to a boat that relies completely on a motor for research?
Great question. The one thing we're trying to do at SEA is really walk the walk of ocean conservation and addressing climate change. And so one way to do that is to really rely on wind power as opposed to using a motor. We do have a motor on the ship. We have an engine. We can use it if there's absolutely no wind. But we're really trying to use the sailboat. I think the sailboat also promotes teamwork and leadership building as well, because you really have to work together to raise those sails and strike them or bring them back down. And so it really encourages people to work together and get close. And then one nice advantage for me on a sailboat is the fact that it's usually a lot quieter than a research vessel because there's no engine running. So that's really nice for me for communication. I think the disadvantages is you're really at the mercy of the weather. As a scientist, it's really hard for me to plan a cruise track and say we're going to be at this point, this point, this point, because I don't know what the weather is going to be doing. We have to go where the wind will take us. And I think in a sailboat too, it's a little bit, particularly our sailboats, they're 34 foot long. So kind of a big for a sailboat, but still kind of a small space when you're considering there's 30-something people living on that boat. And so getting that privacy can sometimes be a little bit difficult just because there's always people around. So you really just have to be in your bunk when you want that alone time. Overall, I would say positive experiences on a sailboat.
Fantastic, great. We have a few more questions. And again, if people have questions, feel free to drop them now. This is an anonymous question that's just come through. What are some of your ideas for future at sea education?
Yeah, great question. So one thing I've been thinking about is kind of the physical design of our boats. So trying to increase accessibility on our ships themselves. So ships, usually the deck is multiple layers, so there's always steps. You also have above, you have the deck section up top, and then you have to go below deck to get to the bunks and where you eat. And so I've been trying to think about ways, how can we actually make the physical structure of the boat be more accessible for people? So things like having maybe the deck be one level, having a wide enough ladder that you can put a small chairlift and maybe even a wheelchair accessibility down below. I think the vibrating alarms and different alarm systems for people is a great addition to the ship. So I would love to see that become more normalized. Even if you don't have anyone with the hearing challenges on your ship, So that's one idea I have for future accessibility on the ship itself. And I think in terms of education, we can really do a better job, again, of incorporating the local perspectives into the programs. So I would love to see not just inviting faculty from the places we visit, but also inviting program assistants, assistant scientists, crew members. So kind of just really embedding and mixing up all the cultures together. I think that will really strengthen the programs and again, give more potential mentors and role models to students from different identities.
Great. I think we have one more question, unless somebody has another burning question. So this question is, it talks a bit more about the curriculum. How much input do students have in designing the research questions and projects that happen at sea? And if you could talk about that.
Sure. Yeah, this is one of my favorite parts about being a faculty member at SEA, is helping students to develop these research projects. So students are pretty independent from the beginning all the way to the end of their research projects. For the very first week on shore, we will share with them, hey, this is the equipment we have available on the ship. This is where we're going. In my case, we do coral reef surveys, so we're doing a lot of snorkeling. So it's a whole different set of type of data that's available to them. So we tell them this is the type of data we normally collect. We invite them to present alternative ideas if they want, although we may or may not be able to make those happen. It just depends on how feasible it is with the time and the resources we have. But yeah, students come up with their own research question, develop a hypothesis based on that question. Usually as an entire class, we're collecting all of the data, and then the students take the subset of data they need to answer their research question. They do their own analysis, and then they present that usually to the ship's company or sometimes in a symposium that includes local scientists, and also write a final paper. So it's pretty cool. So they're getting the full research experience within these usually 12-week programs.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much for answering all the questions. And again, if people have more questions, encouraged to stick around for tea time. I think we can all thank Heather once again for this great insight into research at sea and inclusive research at sea. And with that, I will take over the screen share and just, yeah, okay, thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Please fill out the weekly form. The link will be in the chat momentarily. Join us next week, August 30th, where we will have William Geartree from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln talking to us about body mass constraints on aquatic invasions in tetrapods. And with that, up next is tea time. It's an informal conversation about the talk in a relaxed setting. Usually have like icebreaker questions. The question of the week is, what ocean is on your bucket list to travel to? And with that, I will start a 2-minute timer. Feel free to take a break, get up, walk around, have a drink of water, and see people in 2 minutes. Thank you.